In our last video, we left off at the Hock Shop in the 1500 block of Military Street. As we go further south in that block, there's not a whole lot to see until you get to the end of the block. Not now, and not that much before. There used to be a U.S. Royal store here, tire store, that sold tires in the 60s. And before that, there was some used car lots that were there, but nothing of any significance. But what I'd like to look at is this building here at the end of the block, Standard gas station. I know normally we don't think of gas stations as an historical building, but I do. And how great is it that we still have this piece of history from Port Huron's early history back in the 1920s? Because that's when Standard Oil started to build these stations. This was a basic template for the Standard station. This was the standard station. Today, the oval sign out front shows that it's a State Farm agent. But the oval sign used to say Standard, and this was the company's logo. In this photo of the station, you can see where the pumps were, but they're no longer there, so it must have been shortly after they closed up their station. And looking at this building, I was wondering at the very top here, it looks like there's a little piece of metal up there. I'm not sure what the shape is. Maybe you could tell if you were actually looking at the building and for real, but I wasn't sure what it was, and so I went over to look at another station. Like I said, these were templates, and they made several of these stations in the area. This one happened to be in Muskegon, though. But you can see what was on the top there. It's a flame, very pretty, especially when it was lit up at night. And since this photo is much clearer than the one that we have in Port Huron, and the buildings are almost identical, let's use this photo to look at some of the architecture of this building. First of all, look at the chimney. It's in the very same place the one in Port Huron is at. And then as we go and look at the appearance of the building, the architecture, I think the tile roof is what really sets it off for me. I like that, and it makes it very distinct when you look at a station that identify, I think, more quickly. Now, I'm not an architectural student, but I just know what I like, and I like this. I like how those two peaks come up and they're identical. One's larger than the other, but it certainly draws your eye to it, and the one, of course, draws your eye right to the flame. The building also has great identification. You have, of course, the sign out front, the Standard sign, but you also have the Standard Oil products right in the center of the building, and you have two smaller signs saying Standard Oil products on each side of the door over the windows. And then over the entrance door of the station, you had the personal identification telling you whose station it was. In this particular case, it says Jonesy. And in Port Huron, it was Jim's. The sign's still there that says Jim's. I also like how it's just not a white cement building on the outside. It's a fine white tile, a smaller tile, of course, in the roof. But it shows that Standard Oil put some money into their stations. They could have made it much cheaper. They did try to save money where they could, though. Standard Oil was one of the first oil companies that sent prefabricated roofs to their stations. So that tile roof came in sections and it was quite easily put up. Keep in mind that most gas stations look like this one that was in Port Huron on 13th Street. Pretty much a box affair with a pump or two out front. This photo was taken in the early 1900s, and by the look of the pumps, it was a pretty modern station. I say modern because the fact that it had pumps. The early stations, I use that term loosely, stations, because all you really needed was a pail to fill up cars with gasoline. And that's what they did. Here's a photograph here of how they filled the cars in those days. You had the gasoline in a pail and put it into another container going into a spout, and down it went into the automobile. Many farmers in those days, those early days, opened up gas stations in one of their outbuildings. And it was advantageous for them. It was advantageous for the customer, too. There just weren't that many stations around. In 1900, there was 20 million horses and only 4,000 automobiles. Of course, after Henry Ford and the Model T and mass production of automobiles, there was a lot more of them, and so they got serious about the gas stations and how the gas was going into the cars. In this photo here, we show 3 of the early type pumps. The first one you'd pump just like you did water pumps back in the old days. The second one had a crank on it, but both of those pumps you would have to fill the pail with and then put the pail into the funnel into the car. The third one actually had a hose on it, and that one would be a crank pump, and you could crank it right into the automobile. And here you see one of these pumps in action. You had one fellow doing the cranking, and another fellow had the hose into the gas tank. And of course, back then the gas tank was toward the front of the car. In this photo, you can see it's a rear gas tank in the car, and you can see the fellow here pumping the gas into the car with the hose going into it from the pump. This actually looks more like a pump than it does a crank. Here's a nicely restored pump, as you can see here, with the crank and the hose. And then they also had the roll-out carts where the gasoline would be kept inside. It could be rolled out to the curb and put into the car. Many of these businesses would already have pumps because they used the same type of pump for the kerosene that they used to sell. And this photo here is a nicely restored roll-out cart. As more and more of these automobiles showed up along the road, more and more of these pumps were showing up along the curbside. And although many businesses of all types, including pharmacies, had these pumps out in front of their business, the businesses that made the most sense to have these pumps was the automotive type businesses, which would have the cars there anyway. This photo happens to be a Goodrich tire dealership. And in this next photo here, we can see in the background that it's a Ford dealership. Eventually the gas pump evolved and came out with this type of pump where you had a visual opportunity to see the amount of gas that was actually going in your car, which was supposed to make the customer feel much more comfortable with the gas station attendant, like he wasn't getting gypped. What they would do is that they would pump the gasoline up into the visual part of the pump, and then they would just let gravity take over and drain that amount of gasoline out of the pump and into the car. It wasn't long before you saw these types of pumps being put along the curbside, and still in front of businesses mostly. Gas stations as we know it today just weren't popular yet. There was a few out there, but most of the time you just saw these pumps along the curbside, or out in the boonies you'd see the pumps that some farmer thought he'd make a little money on. Eventually the gas pump evolved to pretty much what we have today. It went from the visual top pump on the left to the face front on the center, and then of course to the meter pump that I remember growing up mainly what I saw. The gasoline stations evolved too. The very first filling stations began cropping up around 1909. 20 years later, in 1929, more than 143,000 stations, mostly run by major oil companies, crisscrossed the United States. In 1913, Gulf Refining Company opened a new type of retail store in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was designed expressly for the purpose of selling gasoline as a fuel for motorists. This was also the first architect-designed fueling station, and was the first to distribute free road maps to drivers. Quite a unique looking building, but I wanted to show you this for another reason. If you look closely, this is a gas tanker that's unloading the gasoline, but there's no pumps involved. They let gravity do the work, and they filled up the pail. The fellow on the left hand, young boy, filling up that one can, and then to the right of that, the other young man is putting it in the underground tank. Pretty difficult way to fill an underground tank. But it's ironic that the first gas tankers that would service the gas stations was actually pulled by the horse. Note the collapsible canopy in the front where the driver sits. And in this photo here, if you've been following my videos, you've seen this before. This was at the foot of Thomas Street, the Standard Oil Depot. And in the background, that's me standing in the front, but in the background you can see the Standard Oil tanker that they used back in the old days in Port Huron. And you see the canopy fully extended in this picture. My generation was the last generation that would know what a full-service gas station attendant was. When I was growing up, you never had to get out of the car to pay your bill for the gas. The gas station attendant came to you. He made change right there at the window. And if it was the wintertime, you didn't have to shut off the car. You could leave your car running. Of course, in summertime, we didn't have air conditioning anyway, so you just rolled your windows down. Quite often, there'd be two attendants that would come out. One would pump the gas, and the other one, of course, would do the other things as a full-service attendant would do. That was because the automatic shut-off pump wasn't invented until about 1940. The first thing they would do is to check the oil under the hood. And that was a moneymaker for them, because then they could sell you an extra quart of oil. And of course, they would check the air in each one of your tires, and they would clean your windshields. They would also offer a free map and help you with directions. And when you're on vacation, it was nice to stop and have the attendants take care of your car. And while they were doing that, most gas stations had a soft drink dispenser of some sort, usually Coca-Cola, and you could enjoy that drink while they were taking care of your car. It was unusual during World War II to see female gas station attendants. And here they are, checking the air on the tires and cleaning this fellow's windshield. However, there wasn't any gas company that stressed full service more than Texaco did. They had it in most of their ads, and many of you in my generation will remember this little video clip right here. This was the opening to the Milton Berle show on television, one of the early programs that everybody was staying home at night to watch.
Oh, we're the men of Texaco. We work from Maine to Mexico. There's nothing like this Texaco of ours. Our show tonight is powerful. We'll wow you with an hour full of howls from a shower full of stars. We're the merry Texaco men. Tonight we may be showmen. Tomorrow we'll be servicing your cars. I wipe the pipe, I pump the gas, I rub the hub, I scrub the glass, I touch the clutch, I mop the top, I poke the choke, I sell the pop, I clear the gear, I block the knock, I jack the back, I set the clock. So join the ranks of those who know and fill your tank with Texaco. Sky Chief, fill up with Sky Chief, and you will smile at the pile of new miles you will add. Fire Chief, fill up with Fire Chief, you'll find that Texaco's the finest friend your car has ever had. And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing America's #1 television star, your June bride, Mildred Burl.
Well, it appears that I took one of my little side trips again, so let's get back to Military Street here in this station. Like I said, the standard oil pumps aren't there in front of the station anymore, but when they were quite unique pumps. Each pump had a crown on top of it, designating the type of gasoline that pump put out. Here's a close-up of these pump crowns. You had the white crown, of course, and then you had the gold crown, and last but not least, you had the red crown. And for some reason, those crowns always made an impression upon me. Even the earlier stations with the earlier pumps had those crowns on them as well, as you can see in this photo. And you can see the gas station attendant waiting for his next customer. But we no longer have gas station attendants. We no longer have the fancy pumps or the unique gas stations. That was another era, an era I really miss. In our next video, we'll look at the other side of Military Street in this block and see what there is there.